with Ryan Ries. This is Live with Ryan Ries. Call now 1-888-564-6173 or post your questions using the hashtag #LiveRyanReese on his Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.
What up, family? I'm excited to be doing another show this Saturday night, hanging out with all you guys, whether you're driving or you're tuning in to the live webcast at ryan-reese.com. I would suggest that you stay tuned because tonight I've been waiting for this interview for months. I have Brett Kunkle in studio. He's the founder of Maven, and I seen him at a conference. I don't know, how many months ago was that?
That was last September.
Dang, it's been that long.
Yeah, it's taken us a while to connect, so this is good.
So I was at this youth conference over here at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and I went to this room, and it was this. The whole thing was basically on technology and the effects it's having, screens and technology that's having on this generation. Yep. And that's something I'm very interested in because obviously as I tour high schools, and I'm up to tune with all the statistics, and we know that anxiety and depression. I always talk about this stuff on the radio show because there are a lot of students that do tune in from the high schools that we're going to and the middle schools. And then also, the show is also syndicated across the United States, and we have a lot of parents also that listen. So it's a mixed crowd. But yes, I mean, if Time Magazine keeps ranting and raving about depression and suicide and technology is just at an all-time high, that means we have a big problem. And this is why I keep talking about it. But the reason why I wanted you to come in is because you deal with this. This is what you study. This is what you do. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your company, why you founded it, and a little background on what you do?
Yeah, well, I actually grew up in the church. And just had such a good experience growing up in the church, being part of really good churches, a really good youth ministry. Actually became a student leader in my youth ministry when I was a high school student, and thought I'm going to go into full-time ministry. I'm going to be a youth pastor, when I graduate from college. And then I go off to college my freshman year, and I went to a local junior college here in Southern California for the first 2 years, and I took a Philosophy 101 class. Where I had a professor, right, who's the PhD. He's the smart guy. And for that whole semester of Philosophy 101, he just dismantled my faith.
Really?
He wrecked me. And he would challenge Christianity in class. And he was cool about it. He'd look at me and say, "Hey, Brett, we know you're a Christian, so how would you answer this difficult challenge or question?" And I would sit there and I'd be like, "Dr. Lane, I have nothing to say." Yeah. But what I would do is I'd start going to his office afterwards to trying to debate him because I knew what he was saying was it was serious stuff. If he was kind of destroying Christianity and I had no response, right. Well then I'm thinking maybe I gotta reconsider this. Maybe walk away from it if it's not true. Right. So that whole thing sent me on this serious episode of doubt where I was doubting my faith and then going and saying, "Hey, all right, can these questions be answered? I mean, is the Bible historically reliable? Do miracles really happen? Did Jesus really rise from the dead 2,000 years ago? Does God even exist?" And I just discovered that there are so many good answers to those kind of questions. And then it opened up this larger world of really using my mind when it comes to my faith, bringing the heart and the head together, knowing what I believe and why I believe it. And what that did for me was it took that doubt that I had and it turned it into confidence that this stuff is really true, that Jesus is really risen from the dead and that he is transforming lives. And so that was kind of my story. So then I went in and became a youth pastor, worked with youth.
Before you talk about that part, there are tons of students that go to college that get dismantled.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just I've heard so many stories. They go full-on Christians, and then they lose their faith.
Yeah. They get dismantled, and there's nobody to help them, or they never find any answers. They don't discover some of the tools that we have, things like apologetics, which is just giving reasons for why we put our hope in this stuff. And they think, well, that's just blind, irrational faith, I guess, because there's no answers to these challenges. And they walk away because God has made us as rational beings. We've got to make sense of the world.
Right.
If something doesn't make sense, then we usually just discard it. And in the same way, when young people who go off to college don't have those answers for those challenges that they're going to get, and not only are they getting the intellectual challenges, they're getting the moral challenges, right? So they're seeing then other alternative lifestyles, or they're seeing the hookup culture. They're seeing casual sex and people living that out. So then there's temptation, and combined with their faith getting smashed intellectually, and they're out. They bounce. And what they don't realize is that we have solid answers. And doubt actually can be a tool that God uses to build your faith. So yeah, we've got to do a better job of helping young people explore those questions, give them the space to ask whatever question they want. Like, no question is off limits. I tell that to my own kids. Yeah. I got 5 kids, and I'm like, hey, whatever question you want, that's right.
That's amazing. So then from there, you went to become a youth pastor? Yeah,
got into youth ministry, started working with junior hires, high schoolers, college students for 11 years, and then really wanted to figure out how I could even more effectively equip young people to know what they believe and why they believe it, and to think more carefully about how, if Christianity is true, if Jesus is risen, if the Bible is the authority, it's God's word, then how does it apply to every single area of my life? Not just like my quote-unquote relationship with Jesus, or my quote-unquote faith, or my personal private, kind of box over here, but how does it actually relate to things like my studies at school? So when I study history, like, what does Christianity have to say about that? When I study psychology, what does Christianity have to say about it? When I study business, what are the insight? If all truth is God's truth, then Christianity will be relevant to every single area of my life. And that's what kind of that process did, was opening me up to this like thoughtful, deep faith in Christ. And I just began to see all of reality through my Christian worldview, through the truth of Christianity. And so, like some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight, social media, technology, screens. Does Jesus have something to say about this? Does common sense have something to say about this? Does reality, how does reality inform us on this? So how does Christianity relate to every single area of our lives? And so that's kind of what I want to do. And I got involved with a ministry called Stand to Reason for 14 years. And then last fall, we started Maven, which is, we wanted to focus just directly on students, junior high, high school, college students, just the next generation. And then also the people who are training them, parents and youth leaders and pastors.
So what do you guys do exactly? Like, I mean, you're pouring into these high school students. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we just launched in September, so we're brand new.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so our website is maventruth.com. And right now it's our initial website. We've got some good friends that are building us a new website as we speak. We're hoping to launch that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I got a phone call on Monday about kind of last details. And what we want to do, one of the things we want to do is provide virtual training, online resources.
Sick. That's amazing.
Videos, podcasts, even some student podcasts. I'm talking to students who are now listening more and more to podcasts. Yeah. Short videos, articles, all kinds of online training for students, and getting them to think carefully about whether or not this stuff is even true, and then live events. So that's speaking. I do a ton of speaking, but also we do conferences for students, and we're doing those around the country. And we also do parent conferences as well. And then lastly, we have our third strategy is what we call immersive experiences. And these are pretty radical trips. These are trips where we take like a youth group, or we work with a Christian school, but we work with a group of Christians who really want to explore and know what they believe and why they believe it. And so we study worldview, we study culture, we study apologetics, and we do training. And then we have 2 trips right now. One is to Berkeley, California. And Berkeley is, a radical place. And what we do is we train students, we go to Berkeley, and then we create opportunities for them to talk to people who don't believe what we believe. So I've got some good atheist buddies up there. I bring them out, and they challenge these Christian students, and they'll kind of give their atheist arguments. And then we'll let the students dialogue and debate, and it's civil and it's friendly, but then it really challenges students. And then afterwards, we just kind of debrief and like, okay, what do you think about that? And what were the flaws in the argument? What were the things you had trouble answering. And we help them see that Christianity can stand up to all kinds of questioning, even from the most hardcore atheist. And then we go on to Berkeley's campus, and we talk to Berkeley students, and students get to share the gospel. They get to share the truth. They get to have really thoughtful conversations. We also do a second trip to Salt Lake City, Utah, where we train students to know what they believe, what Scripture teaches, theology and doctrine, these great truths that tell us about God and about Christ and what He's done for us. And we study those things, and then we go to Utah and we talk to Mormons. Go to downtown Salt Lake, visit the temple, talk to the missionaries, go to BYU, go talk to college students there. And basically, it's just getting this stuff out of, like, behind the four walls of the church and into real life.
That's amazing.
And so we do those trips in those two locations, and then we're building out two new trips. One on the East, oh, actually both on the East Coast, one in hopefully North Carolina, and then one in the Atlanta area.
You know, it's interesting because you could talk to, like, I have some different friends who are involved with different religions, and they know so much. But it seems like there's a very lackadaisy vibe in Christianity where people don't care they don't know their Bibles.
Yeah, what we know about young people, and this is, it cuts across religions. When you look at some studies, like Christian Smith was a sociologist, did a major study on this, but what he basically found is that American teenagers, when it comes to their religion, are completely inarticulate. Like, they can't explain to you basically anything, and it's really bad in the church. Like with Christian kids, you ask them about Jesus, and maybe they get a couple cliches out. Oh, Jesus died on the cross for my sins. Okay, well, but what does that mean? Like, I mean, there's a little bit more to that, right?
Right.
And they don't know. You ask them, hey, list for me. Just list for me. You don't even have to define it, but just list for me the attributes of God. And when I do this with high school students, Christian high school students, they'll list maybe 5 or 6, and then they're like, you know, beating their brain to think, okay, well, what other ones are there? And they only can get 5 or 6 or 7, you know, attributes. Attributes are just characteristics of who God is. And if you look at any, like, just basic theology book, there's going to be 20 to 25. So their knowledge of God is so little. No wonder so many Christian young people are not passionate about their faith, because they don't know. There's nothing to it. I mean, if you think about it, here's an analogy. Okay. If you said, hey, Brett, tell me about your wife, right? It's like, oh, yeah, my wife. Well, my wife is, she's got brown hair. She's 5'6". She's got 2 eyeballs, you know. You're like, no. Don't tell me about your wife. And I said, that's about all I got. What would you conclude about my relationship with her? You'd be like, there's not much relationship. Yeah, there's nothing there. It's really shallow. And that, sadly, is where a lot of our young people are at.
Why do you think? What's the deal? Are they just, like, not getting taught? Are they just, like, disconnected? What's up with them? That you've come across as you've talked to students?
That's a big question. I think there's multiple reasons. I think part of it has to go back to, you can study, like, the history of philosophy for the last 300 years and see how that's influenced, how Western civilization and these philosophical ideas that started in the academy in the ivory tower trickle down into our culture. I think there's some bad ideas. And one of the bad ideas is that there's this division of truth. There's the subjective, private truth and the objective, public facts, right? And so the things that are objective truths, that are facts, that have to do with knowledge, well, that's science, and that's law, and that's business, and, you know, these public things. Private stuff, private truths, your personal private truth, well, that's religion, and that's morality. And so you can have your own private truth. This is what the world says, this is what the culture says. You can have your own private truth. Just don't bring it out of that private level, right? And so there's been this division between knowledge and faith. Like, okay, faith has nothing to do with knowledge according to our culture and according to most Christians, and we bought that. Right. We're like, yeah, okay, it's really about me and my personal relationship with Jesus and how Jesus really makes me feel at the end of the day. And it's become so feeling-oriented and so anti-intellectual, so anti-rational. And the true vision of Christianity is that it's a knowledge. I mean, the New Testament actually talks more about knowledge than it does about faith. There's a huge emphasis on knowledge. In fact, there's a huge emphasis on evidence and fact. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, he's like, if Jesus did not rise from the dead, like if this is not true, he says your faith is worthless. He's like, you should be pitied because you believe in something that's not true. And what Paul does is he takes our faith and he attaches it to fact. And if this is not historical fact, then get out of here. Don't waste your time. Anyway, I think I was really off base in how we even conceive of the Christian life. And so there's other things. And then this is the kind of the shallow faith that we're passing along to our young people. So I don't blame our young people. Man, it is us leaders who have passed this kind of shallow faith on.
I also seen a lot of stuff that happens too is there's like, you know, when they're teaching these students or whatever, there's more like entertainment than even like, there's a lot of entertainment now. And like, let's make sure that, you know, the high school group's like having a good time. We want a lot of kids and, you know, but there's no knowledge. It's like entertainment. Yeah.
I think in youth ministry, we're kind of stuck in the 80s. Like that was like the, right? That's, I mean, like the entertainment model. And I hate beating up on the church because I love the church. But
no, we're here, just so you know, this show, we're here because we love the church, and I want to see great things happen. Yes. So any way bringing guys like you in and different people to inspire people to be amazing and take the world by storm for Jesus, that's why we're here.
We got to be more reflective, and we got to think. And I think, youth ministry hasn't changed a lot since the 80s, and it's kind of that entertainment model, pizza, games, short inspirational talk kind of thing. Hey, and if I got big numbers, that's success.
Right, numbers.
Yeah, and but you look at the culture. I just looked at another study, and you just constantly hear these studies where the percentage between, it was like 2003 or 2006, and today, how many people identify as Protestant Christians, and the numbers just keep plummeting. And amongst young people, like millennials, Gen Zers, you know, kind of the 30 and under crowd, I mean, more and more of them affiliate with no religion. That's what they want. Like we call them the nuns, N-O-N-E-S.
That's right.
It's like no religion, you know. So obviously things, you know, we're not doing well in the culture. We're losing even our own students who grow up in our churches when they go off to college or even high school.
Now we're losing them in high school now, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think in junior high and high school, and part of it has to do with screens and technology and that kind of stuff.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So why is that?
So it's no secret, and most young people you talk to, they're going to admit it. Like so much of their life is lived in front of a glowing rectangle, right? In fact, think about it. We carry these glowing rectangles around with us 24/7. Smartphones, iPads, laptops. We got, you know, multiple screens in every home, every bedroom. We're constantly confronted by the screen. And I think what the screen does, what we really have to think about is when it comes to life and the big questions of life, who answers those questions for us? Like, who's our authority? And now I think that question takes a little time to think about and process a little bit. But I think if we're going to be honest, for our culture, for American culture, we have given so much authority to a screen. Like our screen. So here's what happens. The screens stage the world for us. They put up images and videos, and we see this stuff day in and day out, right? Technology is omnipresent. It's all around us. We see it all day. In fact, Gen Zers and millennials admit to spending about 6 hours a day on their smartphones. 6 hours a day on their smartphones, right? So, and this thing...
Woo! That's a lot.
Yeah, it's insane. This thing is staging the world. What do I mean by that? I mean, it is telling us how we should be. I mean, just think about it. You're scrolling through Instagram, right? And you're just looking at pictures. And you're seeing pictures, and people are posting what they think is valuable, what they value, what they think is of worth, what they think is important, and you're just watching that. And of course, you're not thinking this. You're not thinking, oh, right now I'm being influenced, right? I'm being told what I should be doing. But that's what's happening. It's staging the world, and then as it stages the world, it's telling us this is the way it should be. So, for instance, right, teenage girls, they're scrolling through things. They're seeing their friends put up pictures. and they're seeing things like when they put up a picture that's more of a sexy picture, little risque or whatever, they're getting more likes. They're getting more comments, right? You know, people are, you know, throwing up the fire emoji, right? This is lit.
That's like I've seen jokes on Instagram where like, oh, I didn't get enough likes. Let me take off more clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, for girls.
But that gets likes, so it gets reinforced, and then so it's staging the world from, it's putting pressure on them. You know, beautiful, gorgeous, sexy. Those are the kind of responses now. You know, one is looking for, because that's the world is telling us. Well, that's
what you want.
Yeah, that's what you want. So so this screen stages the world. So it's the authority, and it tells us how we ought to live, how we ought to be in this world.
I was gonna say, now it's changing those girls that weren't like that. Now they're going in that way just because that's what the world's telling
it's
them.
slowly over time. It's, you know, you're not going to look at one post and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to, do this. It's the thousands of posts over time. Think about, how a termite destroys a house. Like, you don't even notice it at first. And it could actually be years before you ever discover there are termites in your house and you got to deal with the problem. But by that time, there's damage that's done. That's what's going on here in the same way. It's just slow and steady. It's just a slow, steady movement of our culture. And all of a sudden, 15 years down the road, you've spent, 6 hours a day on social media being shaped by it, informed by it. And now we're seeing these studies on anxiety and depression.
I think you might have said this quote, or someone else, but I think it was you. You said something about social media can either, build you up, or it could destroy your soul. Was that you or something?
Yeah, actually, that was how it kind of opened that talk, is I wanted students to wake up. And I said, it can be soul corrupting.
Yes.
This screen, and I'm not just talking to students. This is me. This is you. This is adults. I see it with adults as well.
That's everyone.
I struggle with it too.
Yes.
This thing can corrupt my soul. It can corrupt your soul over time. And people think they might respond and be like, that's kind of an overstatement. It's not. And these studies are coming out on this. And so here would be my piece of homework for anyone who's listening who's like, I don't know about that. Do a Google search for an article entitled, "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation? It's written by a psychologist. Her name is Jean Twenge. Twenge. Jean Twenge. It's on The Atlantic. You can find it online. And I'll just summarize. She talks about how we're on screens all the time, and the percentage of young people who have screens now, and the correlation with what she says. She says iGen, or Gen Z, kind of the 20 and under crowd. Yeah. She said they're on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. That's a quote from her. They're on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. And
when did this article come out?
This was last September.
Okay, that was a year ago. Right?
Yeah. So that and there's all kinds of other things we could look at. I mean,
what else does she say? Just a couple more things.
She talked about how there's a connection with smartphones, and now what you have is young people who spend literally all day in the summer when they're off of school. Instead of being out with friends, instead they're all day they're in their room on their smartphone, and so we're seeing this correlation between that. We're seeing how the rise of depression and anxiety, and I mean you can look at, there's all kinds of different studies, but you can look at things like the more hours per day you spend on social media and a smartphone, the greater risk you are for depression and anxiety. For things like going to bed with your smartphone, if you take your smartphone into bed with you, or a screen into bed with you, then your rates of depression correlate with higher rates. When you live your life more on the screen, we're just seeing its impact. And you know what? This is something that I wrestle with my own kids. We've had some heart-to-heart conversations with our own kids about some of their struggles of seeing other things that people are posting, and that that hashtag FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Like
Fear of
that's
missing out.
that's real fear for a lot of these students. They see this stuff and they think they're missing out on things. They're missing out on all this good stuff. And of course, what are people posting? Oh, they went to the school dance, or they went out to dinner and they're eating this good food, or they had this great vacation.
It's all the highlights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then that represents reality. Or that's our perception of reality.
Right.
It's not a real reality, because you're not seeing actually all those moments when the person's alone or bored, or you're not actually even seeing that the student who just posted that picture of being out at the movies or hanging out with all their friends, when that moment that they posted that picture, that they were actually in their bedroom bored, and they were looking at other people's pictures going, man, I'm missing out. No one's hanging out with me. My life sucks. And so they go and they get an old picture and post that.
100%.
Even though, and so they're kind of lying about what they're doing to try and,
They stage like they even said with the Gen Zs is like they're staging. They're staging their. It's like a brand. They're creating this brand, this look, Instagram.
Yeah.
Of what life is, but it's not real.
Yeah, and so here's a way to think about this, because I think that's a huge point right there. I think social media and the screen, particularly the platform of social media, right? So whether we're talking about Snapchat or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, there are certain lies that these social media platforms kind of can tell us that when we buy into them, it impacts our souls. So for instance, one of those lies is I am who I represent myself to be.
Right.
I am who other people, I am the person that the people see. And so we construct this like online identity, right? So we're thinking about what we post, and think about, students will totally relate to this. Think about how many times you take that selfie or that group picture or whatever. Like how many photos will you take so you get the right one? Right, so I'm going to take 30 of them, so I can get that right angle. And if I don't look good enough, I'm not going to post it. That kind of thing. So there's a lot of effort into kind of curating this online identity. And then think about the whole system of likes and followers. That just reinforces stuff. So someone likes I threw up this picture. People like it. I threw up this picture. Not too many people liked it.
So we don't really want to go in that direction.
That's right.
Yeah.
That informs you. So I'm going to start posting more on this kind of stuff. And it starts forming you. It starts forming your identity. And so students will post a picture. It won't get enough likes. And it actually impacts how they feel about themselves. So what do? Delete, right? They delete the picture because they don't want a picture up that doesn't have that many likes, because what's going to happen is their identity gets tied into something like this.
Dang, yeah.
So
true.
So, and they can create this whole false identity, and they can, it gets reinforced by followers and likes. So that's one of the lies. Another lie I think that it tells us is that, I'm the center of my own universe, right? When it comes to life, you think about technology, it really is now more centered on us.
It's all about us, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you think about it. Students today, they don't realize that, these things, phones,
Yeah.
before they were ever smartphones, we had phones, and they had this little thing attached to it. I think you and I know what these are. Like we called them cords, right? There's like a phone cord, and you had to go to a particular location in the house where there was a phone with a phone attached to a phone line and a phone cord, and you had to go to that particular place, and so you had to go to it and then call, and you're there in the family room or the kitchen where other people could hear you. Now, think about it. This thing is tailored to you. It goes with you now. You don't go to it. It comes with you. And then there's all these now apps, and there's all this stuff that it's catering to your needs. And
that's why people are so addicted to it.
Yeah, it gets addicted, and then it tells us that we're the center of the universe.
We are actually I got lost. We're going to a 2-minute break. We'll be right back with Brett. We'll see you right after the break.
More Live with Ryan Ries coming up.
Is everything all right?
Call now 1-888-564-6173 or post your questions using the hashtag #LiveRyanReese on his Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.
I think I speak for the entire administration when I say whoop-de-doo.
Now, back to Live with Ryan Ries. Don't say we didn't warn you. Loud noises!
We are back with Brett Kunkle in studio from Maven, and we've just been talking about the effects of technology. This is what he does for a living. His whole focus is to pour into middle school, high school, which we call them the Gen Z, and even the millennials, and get them equipped with apologetics and just information so they could basically they can follow God and they can live out that purpose that they were created for and not get fooled by the ideas of the world and get distracted, but to get focused and get the tools that they need. So before the break, we were just talking about you were talking about the whole cell phone, how it's catered to these students, that they're getting all the apps, they're sleeping with it in their bed, it's affecting their psyche. Go ahead and let's continue with that.
Yeah, so and this is one of the ways that it influences us, is it tells us these lies. It tells us that think about it, I must have choices, and I can't be happy if I don't have choices, right? So everything has a drop-down menu. Everything's got a drop-down menu. Everything has options. And so we get kind of addicted to this choice. In fact, what happens is we now think that in order for me to be happy, I have to have choices. Right, and I see this with like just at home with my kids. Like the other night, I was talking to my kids and I was going to take them out to dinner. Mom was out of town, so I was like, "Hey, let's go out to dinner. Where do you guys want to go?" And we get a couple different suggestions. So then I said, "Okay, let's narrow it down to 3." Right, and we got 3 choices, and it was crazy. 4 of my kids are at home, and there was definitely everyone chose like a different option. And then one of the kids was like, whatever.
Who chose In-N-Out Burger, though?
That wasn't even on the list.
It wasn't?
No. Because we were going big. Like, we were, like, talking Spaghetti Factory, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, but when we kind of honed in on one place, we had to pick one place, you could just see the other kids. And we're talking good places. So we ended up going to the Spaghetti Factory. It was this killer place. Yeah. A couple of the kids were like, and I said to him, I said, you're not happy that we're going to go have a really good dinner at Spaghetti Factory now? Is that what you're saying? Like with your reaction? And And you think about it. I mean, we're going to go eat really good food, and you're unhappy about that. Why is that? Why is that? Because you've been shaped by a culture that tells you if you don't get your choice, what you want right now at this moment, then you can't be happy. And it leads to ungratefulness and unthankfulness and discontentment.
That's interesting.
And that's a recipe for anxiety and depression and unhappiness. And so, that's how this thing can shape us. And so it's so subtle, right? It's so subtle, but over time, that shapes us. And so now here's what parents do. Like, so let me talk to the parents for a second. So what parents will do is, 2 or 3 kids at home, people want different things. So now I hear about these parents who will even cook different meals for different kids to make them all happy. Or, if they're going to go out, for fast food or something, they'll go to multiple places to make everyone happy. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong to do that in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I want, number one, for us to see how culture shapes us and influences us to do things. Number two, if you're doing that all the time, then what we're teaching our young people is that you can't be happy without choice. And then there's this, I think another influence is that students that are always thinking, they're always kind of holding off on decisions. They're not seizing the moment. They're kind of waiting for that next best thing. Like, well, there's got to be a better choice that's coming, a newer choice that I'm going to wait for. And so then they don't seize the opportunities that are in front of them as well, and they miss out on some really good things. Another lie from social media is that others must see me, right? Think about it. Social media is constantly inviting you to display yourself. Again, not that it's wrong. I want to be clear here. Yeah. People don't understand. I'm not saying that using a smartphone or using a screen or using a social media platform is wrong in and of itself. I've got them. Right? You can check out our social media and that kind of thing. Here's what I want to do. I want to say, even though it's not wrong or immoral or sinful or something like that, it's also not neutral. It's not neutral, meaning just by using it, it can shape you. Just by using this thing, it can shape you. And it does that by staging the world for us. And so it's constantly inviting us to post.
Yeah, it could shape you. Let's talk about that for a second. It could shape you because whatever you're looking at will shape you. Mm-hmm. So you get on and you start watching, say, just a bunch of fight videos. Next thing you know, if you're watching fight videos, you're going to start getting more aggressive, and
it desensitizes you.
It's going to start shaping. Or hey, you start watching start watching some pornographic stuff. Start watching porn.
Oh yeah,
that is going to start shaping you because people go,
absolutely.
How is social media and technology going to shape you? Exactly that. Start watching that stuff, and you're going to go into that direction. Whatever you start looking at, the eye is a light to the body. Whatever you start looking at that goes right into your heart and comes out. That's what you become.
Yeah.
You are what you eat in a sense. And if you're eating that stuff from technology, you become that.
Yeah.
It does shape you.
Yeah. That whole issue of porn with this thing.
Yes. You want to talk about that a little bit? That's a big issue.
Think about that. What we do is we put into the hands of our young people unmitigated or, unfettered, unrestrained access to pornography. And we say, don't look, don't look, don't look. It's like back in the day, it'd be like throwing a bunch of
duffel bag of pornography magazine in their room and say, don't look at them.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, exactly.
I'm going old school 80s.
Yeah.
You went 80s, so I'm taking you there.
Yeah. And what we're finding now, this is a social experiment that's never been tried before. Now we're trying it, and we're seeing devastating results. In fact, Time Magazine last year had a piece on young men now who have grown up for the last 10 or 15 years on porn, easy access online, watch it all the time, totally addicted, and now they cannot they talk about how they can't function sexually with real women anymore. It's actually what happened is porn ruined sex for them. And
because they can't even get excited with girls anymore.
No, and it's destroyed their sexuality, and it just goes to show, look, if there's a way that God has designed us, and when you follow His design plan, it leads to goodness and flourishing. Right. So pornography is just
because a lot of when I talk about this stuff in the high schools or wherever I talk about the students, they laugh. But I've even seen mainstream magazines like GQ and different people. They are saying that there is major problems. So it's not like just so listeners know, this is not just the Christian world. This is the mainstream, the secular world saying there is an issue. People are getting affected, and they can't even interact with a woman. It's done.
There's some more voices that are kind of speaking out on this, yeah. And it's a question of reality. And again, I mean, what's the source of all reality? If the source of all reality is God, if He's our designer, then again, His views on reality are going to be the right views. And what He says about human sexuality is often, of course, the Christian view of sexuality gets kind of made fun of or mocked or whatever, but if God's the designer of human sexuality, then He knows the best way for us to live with this thing. And it's beyond. It's not just a no. That's like how we characterize Christianity a lot. But it's actually a yes. Like God says no to certain things so that you can actually say yes to better things, more beautiful things, more fulfilling things. So. Yeah,
I want to keep talking about this, but I want to let the listeners know in a couple minutes we're going to talk about what we can do to combat these things and to move forward. So
yeah, let me give a couple more lies here. Think about this one. Here's a lie that we're tempted by with social media. I don't have to deal with you. Right? I don't have to deal with you. You know what? You said something I don't like. You made a comment I don't like. You posted something I didn't like. Psh, unfollow, right? Block, mute, whatever. And so if someone does something or says something we don't like, then we are conditioned by social media to just unfriend them, unfollow them. It's much easier to just abandon the relationship, abandon the person, than to kind of go through that difficult, demanding relationship. And so what happens is when we get conditioned by that, it spills over into real life. And so young people are admitting that they have a tough time sustaining friendships and relationships. Yeah. And when there's conflict, they're out, right? And then think about someone who's been conditioned by that for 25 years and then decides to get into a marriage relationship. The most difficult relationship there is. Yeah. You know, there's no unfriending or unfollowing at that point unless you're going to call it quits. But we've been molded relationally by that whole thing.
That's interesting.
So these are the kind of lies. And then what we see is normal for everyone. Like what I'm scrolling through, what I'm seeing is normal for everyone. But think about it. If you think about the kind of the slice, the small percentage of people who are on kind of social media, it's typically affluent, middle class, upper class, Westerners. So much of the world is not represented on social media. And so it gives us a false perception of reality. And we think, the good life consists of clothes and celebrity status and food and vacations. And that's just not how the vast majority of people live. But this, again, shapes our view of reality.
That is, I didn't even think about that, because I mean, you got to have money to be able to get a smartphone. Yeah. And pay the bills for it. You got to have something. And most of the world doesn't,
Yeah, so those are the things that social media can tell us that can shape us.
So what can we do?
Well, there's a number of things you can do. Number one, I'd say if you are someone who's a follower of Christ, the first thing you can do is you can ask the right questions. And the right question that I should ask about my phone or my laptop or any screen is, how does this thing help me to love God and serve my neighbor? Right? I mean, that's what Jesus said, the great commandment. Right. Love God and love your neighbors yourself. So how can this thing help me serve others? Because I want to say, hey, there is great potential, not just for bad and for evil, but for good. There's great potential for good here in this technology. Yeah. So how can we use that? And
there's no in between. It's either good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, and there's different degrees of impact,
Yeah.
goodness and badness, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's not, again, it's not neutral. But we don't want to say, hey, just throw, I'm not saying throw your screens out the door
Yeah.
for good, because there's some great good that we can do. So the very first thing we do as a follower of Jesus Christ is we come to the table and say, okay, let me just ask certain questions. Now, think about it. In the culture's not, of course, asking that questions. The culture says, the cultural questions are, hey, what will make life more convenient? What will make me happy? What is, those are the questions of the culture. And we just simply adopt those things. So the only reason someone might buy us, an upgraded iPhone or whatever is because it's got new features. And, well, as a follower of Christ, that may not be good enough reasons for me to do that. I got to think about deeper questions. So I think we got to start with even just thinking about asking different questions about this stuff and saying, okay, how can this thing help me? How will it help me love God and love my neighbors? So we start with the right questions, and then we become the right kind of people. Because there's no set of rules, no list of rules that we could create that's exhaustive, that covers everything. We have to also be thinking about, okay, who are we becoming on the inside? Like things like character and goodness. And, so what kind of people are we becoming? Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians chapter 5:22, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Are these things, am I growing in these kind of things? Because ultimately, it's that inner character that's going to help me have self-control when there's no external rules, when mom and dad aren't there. Okay, so those are huge things. But very practically, some things that we can do just really practically is, number one, we need to unplug regularly. Like unplug from screens on a regular basis.
How long? Like, what do you think?
I would say,
like?
Okay, so I would say start with just a day from morning to nighttime. And so I guess till the
Are
next
you
morning.
crazy?
I know, that's, I get students who look at me when I suggest that, and I can see it on their faces, like, are you crazy? No way. And I tell them the amount of resistance you have to me even suggesting that reveals that you're addicted to that thing.
Yep.
That thing controls you. You don't control it, right? And so for those who would struggle with that, I'd say do it in groups. Do it with a friend. Take a break, unplug with a friend or a group of friends and you say, okay, and maybe just start with a half a day. Start with certain hours. Start with a 4-hour period.
It's like fasting.
Yeah, exactly.
Start with a meal.
That's right.
Start with a couple hours.
That's right. Don't go on a 40-day fast, right?
Exactly.
So unplug regularly. And you can do that in different ways. It can be certain hours or a time frame. And ultimately, I think what would be really healthy for our souls is if all of us took like a weekly break, right? Took like a Sabbath, took a whole day every week just to unplug from all of it. But then you could have screen-free locations. So like in our house, one thing that we do is at dinner time, at meals, we have a general rule. And of course, every once in a while, there's an exception for whatever reason. But generally speaking, we sit down for dinner. There's no screens.
Zero, yeah.
No screens. And I even try not to have it on me. I'll try to put it up on a little counter we have. Because if it's in my pocket, then it's buzzing, and it's a distraction. So if we can get those things out of there, the dinner table is a screen-free. Or if we're out to dinner, or if we're out for a snack or whatever, late night in and out run, we're no screens at the table, no phones at the table, or they're turned off. If you go out, so here's a practical way to do this with your friends and your buddies. Do a phone stack. Right, if you're in the phone stack where everyone takes their phone, and you can put it on vibrate or whatever, and you stack them during a meal, and if anyone, the first person who reaches and grabs their phone before the end of the meal, before you guys are done, has to pay for everyone's meal. That'll stop you from getting your phone, and then you're not looking at your phone. You're actually engaging with one another.
Yeah.
There's eye contact. It's an opportunity to go deeper in relationship with one another and get to know
Relationships have got shallow because
Oh, yeah.
I mean I'm not talking about anyone. I'm just even talking about myself, dude. I could be at dinner with my wife or my friend, and we're hanging out, and all of a sudden now I'm like getting texts or whatever. I'm looking at stuff, and what am I even doing at dinner?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it cuts us off from really developing deep relationships and friendships.
Yeah.
Which is what we need as human beings.
That's how
We
God
need each
created
other.
us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So unplug, screen-free locations, screen-free hours, screen-free days. Just figure out ways to unplug. I would say, and sometimes you do need to unplug. You just need to take a long break. Yeah. So I know some, high school students in my home church youth group here in Southern California who have just kind of dumped certain social media platforms. Said, you know what, I'm off Instagram for a while. I'm just going to shut it down for a few months. And they've talked about things like that. So sometimes you got to do that too. Especially
I've had some people do that.
Yeah, I would say test yourself. You want to see the power it has over you, take a break. And when you really struggle with that, that'll tell you need to take a break and you need to take more breaks.
I even heard of someone saying that they would only check their Instagram one time a day, like before they go to bed.
Yeah.
That's also.
That's a great way to limit it and its influence on you. I'd say here's a real basic one. Turn off your notifications.
Oh,
don't let the
sure.
thing, call out to you every single second of the day. Turn off all your notifications. The only notifications I have are for phone calls and texts. Otherwise, every social media platform notification is off because I know how this thing can control me. And I don't want it to control me. I want to control it. Yeah. So turn off notifications. I would say if you've got the kind of relationship with like a mentor or your parents or a good friend where they can help you set some ground rules. So with my kids, my daughter got a smartphone. She's 15. She got it, I don't know, it was a year ago or so, where she got, kind of a full-blown smartphone, and I came up with a contract. It's like a 2-page contract where it spells out some of the rules and guidelines, but also the why, because I want my kids to know there's a why behind this. There's not just a rule, but there's reasons why. And I always give my kids the opportunity, if they think my rules are off base, they don't like them, they can always give me a reason why they think I'm off base.
Right.
And I'll try my very best to listen. And if they're reasonable, if they've got better reasons than I do, I want to be just, willing and humble enough to say, okay, let's change this rule. This rule doesn't need to be here. You gave me good reasons why I shouldn't have this rule. But so they know we can have that conversation. So we laid out this contract with the what's and the why, and things like don't take your phone to bed. You can never have your phone in bed with you. Because I've looked at the studies. I know what that correlates. I know the temptation to be on, line even, more.
I've read a couple of those too.
Yeah, and so things like that. And then I had her, look over it, and if she'd agreed to it, then I was like, all right, we'll do this,
Now, with that said, have you ever heard of, I was coming back, we have like 5 minutes left before that show ends, but I was flying back from Florida or something, and I was sitting next to this parent and her daughter. We were talking, and they're from Texas, and she was complaining to me that her daughter's, just being, she's 12 years old, just, doing her thing. And she's like, yeah, if she just keeps acting like this, I'm gonna just turn off all of her apps. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, I have an app that actually controls her phone. Mm-hmm. So basically she has full access over her phone to like shut it down. Yeah. So the way she uses it is like, hey, if everything's cool, we're doing good, you could use your apps, or like if she's on restriction or if it gets to a point where she can only use her phone certain hours, it's open from this time. Like it turns on from like after school till like 5 p.m. And then it all shuts down. It erases all the apps on her phone. Have you ever heard about those apps?
Yeah, I've seen some of those, and I think those are
that's
great.
Pretty interesting.
They can be a great tool. I think the thing you want to do is, and this is where these kind of conversations happen when they happen up front. Like they're because they set the expectations, right? So I made a mistake with my oldest daughter, giving her cell phone and then just kind of like saying, hey, go for it. Like get all the social media you want, do whatever. and then realized, oh, she's, as a junior hire, she's having trouble managing this and starting to pull it back in.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, she already had it, and now I'm asking her to give it up. That
Yeah.
makes it a challenging thing. But at the end of the day, a parent who loves their kid sometimes has to do the tough things, and that might be shutting down the phone, whether it's using an app or actually taking the phone, that kind of thing. And this is where students, and all of us need to think about, like, hey, these kind of things are privileges. They're not rights. These are privileges. And especially if, if someone else has gifted it to me and they're paying for it for me, I mean, that's a gift.
These are like serious issues. As I have kids that are growing up. I mean, I just think about phones like a gun almost. It's like it could kill you. It could kill your soul. Basically, destroy your soul. It's like we got to be careful. You get the phone into a kid and you don't have rules set up. I mean, dude, they just start getting involved in certain things they start seeing. I mean, it will, like you said, there's no in between.
Yeah, the social science proves this.
Yeah, there's just too many people.
The facts are out there.
The facts are there.
This thing will not meet your deepest needs and desires.
Yeah.
No technology ever can. Only a person can.
We have 1 minute left. Any last words?
Wake up. Wake up. The social media and technology has a huge impact on of course, our culture and our society, but also on us personally. And I would say, and I'm starting to hear some of this from some students who are kind of pushing back and saying, wait a second. Okay, we've kind of had this experiment now for however many years that we've had smartphones in particular,
right?
And they're starting to say, wait a second, we've kind of just been handed this, and it's just been like baptized as, hey, it's good, just go with it. And students are saying, no, actually, we're seeing some stuff from this, and unfortunately, it's going to take some wrecked lives to wake us up. But at the very least, if students can sit back and go, wait, I think I need to take a deeper look at this.
Yeah, it's true, because we've been given it, and now there's been no studies. So it just unleashed, but now there's enough information that I mean, I have one student. He's one of my friends' sons. He was in high school and he was into social media, and the phone was basically controlling his life. And he started hearing the whosoever's kill the noise message about kill the noise is basically disconnect and tune into God. And basically what happens, he disconnected. And literally, he ended up becoming the the wrestler, state champion wrestler, because he disconnected and tuned into God. Yeah. Thank you, Brett, for being on the show. And, dude, I got to have you back ASAP.
I'd love to come back. This is a great conversation.
This has been Live with Ryan Ries. To connect or find out more about Ryan, click on ryan-reese.com. Check us out next Saturday at 9 p.m. for Live with Ryan Ries.